Alright, we're entering the home stretch of these Daniel studies, and it's been a lot of information. I think for these studies it's probably been more just introducing and presenting a lot of material for you guys to chew on. It's also, for me personally, it's been good to kind of think and rethink and say, is that as accurate as I thought it was, or should I, and kind of has piqued my curiosity to see, does that hold all the way through the book of Daniel. Now we're entering a thing here though in Daniel from 1136 on to the end of the chapter, or end of the book, that I'm going to be quite honest, it's very in the air on. I can just, the best I'll probably be able to do with some of this is propose some theories. What I'm going to ask, in fact, we'll ask you, Lord Christ, that you would, that it's just as you've been willing to share so many times, and you've just been waiting for people to ask. I'm not saying I'm that great at asking, or have asked a lot, or even know how to pray very well. But I would love to have a revelation. I'd love to have a revealing of your word here. I'd love to make it make sense, oh God. You said every word is needed for us to be nourished, including Daniel 11, including Daniel 12. Please, God, who wrote this word, reveal this same word to us and teach us this same word by the power of the Holy Spirit. By way of a very, very brief review of what we just read, the events of 11:21 through 35 of Daniel dealt with one main character. Antiochus Epiphanes. They told us that he seized the throne by deceit. He had victory over Egypt. His first visit was with a small number deceitfully. Second visit was with a vast army to conquer. That after his second visit to Egypt, he attacked Jerusalem. That in his third trip to Egypt, he was unsuccessful. And after his third visit to Egypt, he plundered Jerusalem and desecrated their temple and their worship. Some Jews fought back to restore the worship. Others joined Antiochus and forsook their religion. So in brief, first visit to Egypt. And then he does second visit. And then after that, he does first temple destruction. And third to Egypt. And then second temple destruction. Do you remember on these 3 trips to Egypt which ones were successful? That's alright. That's fair. Okay. Success, and unsuccessful. Okay. That is more or less the summary of his major events of his life that we covered there. So now, with that in mind, we enter the end of Revelation 11, or Daniel 11, and we are on 36. I just want someone to read, in fact, 36 through the end of the chapter.
Sure. Then the king shall do according to his own will. He shall exalt and magnify himself above every god, shall speak blasphemies against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the wrath has been accomplished. For what has been determined shall be done. He shall regard neither the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall exalt himself above them all. But in their place he shall honor a god of fortresses, and a god which his fathers did not know. He shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and pleasant things. Thus he shall act against the strongest fortress with a foreign god, which he shall acknowledge and advance its glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and divide the land for gain. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. He shall also enter the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his hand: Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and against the land of Egypt, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his heels, but news from the east and the north shall trouble him. Therefore he shall go out with great fury to destroy and annihilate many. And he shall plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and no one will help him.
All right, so here we have someone called, in verse 36, the king. The king shall do as he wills. Question is, who is that king? Any guesses?
Epiphanes?
It would seem like that. Okay. Antiochus Epiphanes. Why would it seem like that? The context, right? We just talked about it. It makes sense. But here's the problem with that. It's unlikely, historically, that the events of 40 through 45 happened near the end of Epiphanes' life. At least it's not recorded in anything but one fragment of something from an earlier person, like in a Porphyry, who's in the 300 AD or something. So you have a lot of events that happen very specific that aren't recorded of Epiphanes, but it could be that. Other guesses of who that is? I'll give you 4 main ones. Number 2, King Herod. Some people said that is King Herod. Why? Because he's the only one who's referred to as the king in the Bible. In the New Testament, he is called the king. And he fits the relative time scale of when this would have happened. Why not? The context of this chapter seems disjointed from what happened in the history of Herod. Another guess, the third, that it's Antichrist. It's jumping to who Antichrist is. Why? It seems to refer to the different events that would happen in Antichrist, especially Daniel 12, as you'll read on. Why not? There would have to be a sizable leap of time between the time of Antiochus and the time of Antichrist, which Daniel 11 doesn't seem to make. It seems to just read like person after person after generation after generation after generation. How would it all of a sudden jump to Antichrist later? The fourth and final theory on who this king is the king is the Roman Empire. So not a person, but a Roman Empire. Why? A kingdom can be called a king, and Rome fulfilled everything that is mentioned there. Why not? It would be strange for this king to be referred to as a kingdom when all the other kings that we've mentioned are just specific people. So, again, the 4 theories: Antiochus Epiphanes, King Herod, Antichrist, and Rome. So, who is the one? Any guesses on your take? I wish I could tell you this is the one. The fourth one, Rome? Yeah, the third one. The third one, Antichrist. It's like, wow. Okay.
Tell us, Brian.
Well, here's my position. I don't know. I lean heavily toward the position that the king in its immediate context is Antiochus Epiphanes. But I believe that Daniel 12, which is part of the same vision, alludes to Antichrist. And so he would be a type or a shadow for Antichrist. That is, Antichrist will act in some way similar to Antiochus Epiphanes. So if it's Antiochus Epiphanes, did he fulfill all the events that we just mentioned there in 36 through 45? One person, Porphyry, a non-Christian scholar of the 3rd century, said that Epiphanes' history does exactly what it says there. The problem is I only found one person who said that. And he was quoted by Jerome, who was a Christian. So the question is, if I could find more sources, which I haven't done a lot of digging, maybe someone watching someday will say, here's all this history, and I just don't know myself. So that's part of the issue there. So there's two possibilities then, finally. One, either that one person who said about the history, we accept that he's correct and say, well, maybe that's true. Or two, this is a theory, is that those final verses were a recap of his life. Because in a recap summation, that would have been true of Antiochus. But if it was a separate, if they're talking about a 4th visit to Egypt, that would be a little more difficult to swallow. All right. Any more guesses on your end? Rooftalk might have something for later. Think about it. That's what we're doing in these studies, is just presenting the information so you guys can say, who would that king be? So now you have a little etching of something brand new probably. Okay, final part of the vision, final leg here, chapter 12, verses 1 through 4. I got it. 12:1. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, who has charge of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. That's the same word Jesus used in temple destruction, by the way. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book of life. So what is that time? It must refer to the time event at the close of Daniel 11. Michael shall stand up. Michael standing up is giving victory to the Jews. He is seen as standing up, I don't know if you remember this, at the beginning of the 1260 days in Revelation. You remember that? When Michael, where is it? Revelation 12. I want to say Revelation 12, but I'm not sure if that's...
12:7.
There he goes. It was 12, yeah. 7. Okay, in chapter 12:6, the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God, which she is to be nourished for 1260 days. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated. There was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown out, and all these things that happened. He deceived the earth, and then it was 1260 days. So it's a very good correlation there with Daniel 12 and Revelation 12, is that Michael is all of a sudden standing up. So that very well could be the time of Antichrist, is where he's standing up. That would make sense. Time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. Considering the intensity and magnitude of troubles within a short time span, that's what happened. Now, Matthew 24:21, Jesus speaks a similar language to describe Jerusalem's destruction. He said it was a trouble greater than any thus far in the world. He adds, nor ever shall be, a phrase that is absent in Daniel 12, verse 1. You notice that? It's a time of trouble such as never has been. And Jesus says, nor ever will be. So it might leave a room for saying there's a greater one, that it's predicting the abomination that causes desolation in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says this is the biggest struggle that would happen. Written in the book, that is verse 1, it says, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. Those are applied to those who are truly God's people and have not sinned against him. In Revelation, after the 1260 days or day years expire and other events take place, God judges the world based on who is written in the book of life. Revelation 20, borrowing the same language. Let's go to verse 2 of Daniel chapter 12. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Here's a question. It says, many of those who sleep shall awake. What does that sound like to you?
Resurrection of the dead.
Yeah, absolutely. It speaks of resurrection. And the historical reference, this terminology may denote the new life of religion spiritually resurrected after the siege of Antiochus expires. Because similar language has been used, so it might be a metaphorical resurrection of the dead, a resurrection, a revival of God's purpose in them. Isaiah and Ezekiel say a similar language. However, there also seems to be a link to Revelation 20, verse 12. Go there. It says, "And I saw the dead, great and small, standing there before the throne, and books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life, and the dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done." So you have excuse me, similar language there, and that's where people are physically resurrecting. So what does this mean? Well, it says some are going to resurrect to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. In the time of Antiochus and the Maccabees, some Jews were honored for their service to God, while others would be called forth to public shame. But the judgment is also reflected in Revelation 20 as the eternal judgment of all who are raised from the dead. What I hope you're seeing here is that in a type or a temporary, it could have happened at Antiochus Epiphanes. But in a total fulfillment, it must have been, it's fulfilled in Revelation at the end of time. Okay, does that make sense? All right, 12 verse 3. "And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above." The wise shine like stars. The wise are the righteous. Shining as lights happens in this life, but ultimately will be fulfilled in our resurrected bodies. It says in 1 Corinthians, we'll be like stars in heaven, but it does say you can shine like a star now if you live for the Lord now. Okay, 12 verse 4. "And those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." Listen to that. It says, seal the book. The meaning of these prophecies will not be understood at this time. Contrast this to Jesus opening the sealed book in Revelation 5, where more is added to this sealed book and understanding. Okay, we'll go on. "Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others stood, one on this bank of the stream, and the other on that bank of the stream. Someone said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, 'How long shall it be till the end of these wonders?' And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, he raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished." Okay. So the angel swears that these events would last for how long?
3.5 times, half a time.
You got it. The 3.5 times, the 3.5 years, which we saw in Daniel 7 with the little horn. Now if you go to Revelation 10, Revelation 10, verse 1, says, "Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud, with a rainbow over his head. His face was like the sun, and his legs like pillars of fire. He had a little scroll open in his hand. He set his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the land. Called out with a loud voice." Verse 4, "And when the seven thunders had sounded, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, 'Seal up what the seven thunders have said, and do not write it down.' The angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and what is in the earth and what is in it, the sea and what is in it. And that day, the days of the trumpet shall be sounded by the seventh angel. The mystery of God will be fulfilled, just as he announced to his servants the prophets." Okay, I kind of read that fast. I don't know if you caught the similarity though. In Daniel 12, in what I just read in Revelation, an angel has a book. An angel swears by God that there would be no delay in the event happening. And after stating this, we are shown that the event would last for 3.5 years or 3.5 times. It's a very similar picture. One standing on the sea and the land. I think the one in Daniel stands on Where does it say he stands? On the bank of the stream and on the other bank of the stream.
Hmm.
So it's a similar picture, again, where it picks it up there. So, 3.5 years. Let's talk about that then. That's the main event here. In Antiochus caused the Jewish temple to be deserted and the daily sacrifice ended. 3.5 years later, the service was restored by Judas Maccabeus. So you took away the daily sacrifice in the Jewish service and then restored it after 3.5 years. Fulfillment in the papacy. Well, we've talked about this before, the 1260 years of when the Pope had power. Listen to this. As Antiochus brought in foreign elements to the Jewish temple, so the popes throughout history have brought foreign doctrines and practices into the people of God, the temple of God, who are called a temple. Antiochus thus is seen as a striking type to the office of Antichrist. Okay, we're almost finished here with Daniel 12. Okay, verse 8. I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, O my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? He said, Go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves wait and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1290 days. Let's talk about that. That adds how many days to 1260?
30.
Yeah, there's an extra 30 days. Listen to this. The daily sacrifice was taken away in May 168 BC, when Gentile soldiers took possession of the temple. On December 25th of 165 BC, the temple was cleansed by Judas Maccabeus, and Jehovah's worship was restored. If 1 year is 360 days, then there are 1290 days between these two events. So why is 30 days more than the 3.5 years of Daniel 12, verse 7? After 3.5 years, listen to this. So the whole thing, the sacrifice was taken away, then it came back. After that time period, Antiochus' forces left Jerusalem, but it took another 30 days before the temple was completely purified and worship was restored. Why is that significant? I think if that type holds to Antichrist, you have a very striking type. That he had a dominion and a power for that 1260 year time period, but then he was taken away, but then he lost his power, but the effects were still there for a while. Final verse. Here it is. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 1335 days. But go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. Now we have another. Where does the 1335 days come from? Ready? This is the last thing. After Antiochus Epiphanes died sometime in February of 164 BC. If it was around the 10th of February, which is very likely, this would be exactly 1335 days after he first seized Jerusalem, and 45 days after Judas Maccabeus restored the true worship. So, this picture, this time period is when they had basically the 3.5 years when he took away what was going on in the temple. They were surrounding the city. But then there's a little bit of time where its effects were still felt. And the very last gasp until he died, where his effects were less and less and less, but he was still around. He didn't have the same power and authority, but he was still around. Which I think, in all honesty, that's very accurate for the position of the Pope.
And so,
that he does not have nearly, you read what happened in the Middle Ages, for instance, you see the political sway, you see the political power, you see the decisions he can make, you see how he had power over people. He could just, the Inquisitions, all those times and things, he had a power, but then all of a sudden, look at the Protestant Reformation has made even Catholics are like, yeah, I believe in born again and this, like they're actually losing some of that, stuff, and to try to bring in some of the scriptures. Now, I think he's going to be around until Christ comes back. The office is going to be around, but I don't think it'll be in the same power as it ever was during the 1260 years, if this type holds true. Does that make sense? Okay. There it is. There it is. All right. So this is just in summary of the last couple of verses that we saw here. A is short for Antiochus. When he came to Jerusalem and he took away, here's what he did, took away the daily sacrifices, and the Gentile soldiers stormed the temple and did that, which is the abomination of desolation. That happened at this time period. There's a specific date, I don't have it on me right now. 3.5 years later, he was forced to leave, and so there's the 1260. However, another 30 days remained. If you can imagine, just think of a temple and all the things that were there and all the things that were, messy and everything like that, had to get taken out. It took 30 days to actually purify the temple. So the temple completely restored and purified. It was 30 days later, that was the 1290. And then finally, the man didn't die till 1335. So there's no chance of him coming back. Or 1335 days after he first came. So there's no chance of him coming back. So if you look at it like a peak, it's like here it comes, and now this, think about the type, by the way. Daily sacrifice taken away. What does that mean for Christ? The daily sacrifice is taken away, it means the access to him is gone. You can't receive him on a daily basis. You can't come to him, you can't know him. His sin, or his cross does not affect your sins on a daily basis. It does not change you. All these things that I believe did happen when the Catholic Church was in the ascendancy, and that doctrine was taken away. So this is like at the height of it. The temple was totally stormed by outside troops, by Gentiles, and all the purity of the church was just wrecked for that time. Now, if he loses his power, he has to leave the temple, Antiochus. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is finally, it's getting a little bit better, But there's 30 days. To me, this is like, if you follow the type, this would be kind of like the Reformation time, or the time where you're purifying the doctrine. You're realizing, oh wait, shoot, we got a lot of baggage with us, Or you look at, some people get really upset with the Protestant reformers because they're like, but they were violent too. Where did they learn that? They grew up in the Catholic Church for that long. That's the way they knew to do things, So some of that had to be eliminated from them, even though the power wasn't as felt anymore. And then finally, even when it's restored and purified, there's still a threat of him there. He's still around, so it's less and less, but he's still around until he finally dies. And then again, if that fits the type, then Antichrist, and if we're saying it's the office of the Pope, then that would be when Christ comes back, would be 1335 would be the symbolic portion of when Christ comes back. Mm-hmm. So that's literal days, whereas we're saying it would be day years in the historicist